start by saying we're using a lot of rounded numbers. And do you all realize that this is a projection? Like we don't actually have an exactly correct count, right? You understand that? If there's some like horrible event and a bus goes over the rail, it doesn't like go down by 36. It would be super cool. I gotta make sure that we all understand this is the best estimate we have, and by the way, the entire planet basically uses this exact algorithm. So you can go to like a bunch of websites and ask for the world population, and they're all going to be slightly different numbers because of buffering speeds and internet connections and different computers and stuff. But they all basically proceed at roughly the same pace, which is around 158, 159 per minute or so. We don't actually know the exact population. But we do know each country's census data or estimate of population. And then we know each country's birth rates and death rates, and these are all reported to an international organization with a bunch of full-time nerds that just keep track of all those numbers. And they go, oh my God, Samoa has a measles epidemic. And so they'll lower the birth rates and raise the death rates for Samoa. And at any time birth rates or death rates change, this giant equation has a slightly different exponent on one of the variables. And so the speed of this ticking very subtly accelerates or decelerates. Am I tripping, or did my phone just make one ring?
It did.
No, you're tripping. So this is the best estimate we've got, and as a general average, ruling out unique events, our planet is 2.5 Santa Barbaras bigger than it was yesterday at this time. Which means our planet needs to accommodate 2.5 school districts more educational infrastructure than it did yesterday. Our planet has to grow by that many number of custodians and that many number of school teachers and that many number of desks and books or iPads or whatever. If our planet is that much bigger, we needed to have 11.5 hospitals opened in the last day. Hey, Frangie, I'll send someone right now. Could one of you please go to the business office? There's boxes. That's like a lot of hospitals and stuff, but instant promotion for Liam Tormey right there. Instant promotion. But I guess, do you all understand why we're not actually gonna build 11 hospitals in the next 24 hours? Like,
no, it's possible.
right? No, I mean, this is actually not a...
Because we don't have enough hospitals already.
With the old
Hard.
nerds, they're expensive.
Because most of the world population is growing up in health.
Hey-o! While you're all being silly, Leventhal nailed it. Go figure. Leventhal, why are we not actually keeping up with this degree of unified school districts and this degree of hospitals because
Most of the population growth is happening in developing countries.
as a point of reference, I used your quality of life, which globally is an absurd notion. Your hospital quality and your educational attainment are not normal. Matter of fact, if we looked around the planet, I'd be surprised if one hospital opened yesterday. I'd be surprised if our planet added a 10th the number of teachers that we're talking about. Because Santa Barbara's not getting any bigger. Like, I'll give you a hint. The United States did not grow by 2.5 Santa Barbaras. Matter of fact, you could look at all the developed nations, please look up. Pretty much everything above this line. All of that. It shrunk in the last 24 hours. Teachers are shrinking in number in those countries. And hospitals are probably, consolidating those numbers. These people are showing up under this line. With a couple of exceptions.
Australia.
Not there and not there. And not a couple of islands that I can never find. We'll come back to those places later. Can you imagine, if all these people were, buying cell phones and SUVs and stuff? Our economy would be raging. Do you all know that the United States is the world's largest manufacturer of goods? Even though China has 5 times more people?
Well, is it the largest manufacturer of goods, or
Goods and services?
do we put those in other countries?
Beneficiary of manufacturing. They're not in China. That many people are showing up somewhere. They're not showing up at my house, which is kind of sad. Because the truth is, if any 4 of you wanted to come live at my house, we could make it work, Be a little uncomfortable, probably. Only have 2 bathrooms. I use one of them a lot. I eat a lot. Takes a lot of grooming for this hair. But I think 4 of you could show up at my house and we could probably still eat like kings.
Good to know.
Yeah. No, it's really. My dog ate tuna last night. Again. But I think those 4 people aren't showing up at my house. I think those 4 people are showing up at a house that's already struggling to feed their kids. Somebody's looking at their pizza like, I can't make more slices. That's cool. It's on the other side of the wall, so we're fine. We got all the guns. It's cool. Yeah, we got 1.2 guns per American right now. Do you know that on Black Friday, America sold more guns than the entire Marine Corps has? There's not a lot of Marines. It's probably important to point out the Marine Corps is a pretty small branch of the military. Good God. My house. I got you, fam. Come on by. You're good. You don't have to buy them. You can use mine. I got so many.
I'm really good.
You are.
McKenna would shoot a gun and just fly.
No.
Just
Shut up, Matthew.
Yeah, so, oh my God, all these people, but don't worry, they're just in the poor countries. There's no way to make this sound right. There's no, you're either barfing in your shoe or you're barfing in your other shoe. Oh God, this is not right. Who has a metronome? Metronome app? There's not a single musician in this room.
No one uses metronomes anymore.
Everybody uses metronomes. This is the first class I've ever taught where a student didn't have a metronome on their phone.
It was a Google one. It's easier to access.
What?
Google is easier to access.
Use your Google one. Can you make me 158 beats per minute really loud on your phone? Every time that I'm in this class,
158.
every time that I'm in this class, and I'm yelling at my students about some horrific global problem, like food scarcity, like water pollution, like climate change. Matthew's getting ready to drop it, but he's got nothing to drop.
What's up? 2020?
Drop it like it's cold, Matt.
Hey, what's up, Shuffle 2020?
This is the sound I have in the back of my head.
How are you?
Yeah, that is a successful baby production. Wait, no, that's not correct. That is not correct.
It's a successful baby birth.
That is the margin of babies over funerals. So there are births which are offset by death, right?
Yes. That was the number good.
Slightly down.
Yeah.
So this is like the sprinkler of babies that we're like adding. That we're adding.
So bad to think of.
So if it would be like extra births, it would be like 2 times as fast.
What?
If it would be like actual births, it would be like 2 times as fast, right?
Yeah. The actual births are about twice as fast.
I can turn this off.
I guess.
The whole class.
It's okay, I hear it in my head anyway. And I don't know how to feel about this. Like, part of this is like, oh my God, we can't keep up with quality of life needs for this many people. Another thing I know is we don't have enough stuff for all those humans to live like I do. We would need another 6 Earths to outfit this many humans with my car, my clothes, my guns, my diet. 6 Earths. We would need a total of 7 or so for all of them to live like me.
1 billion per Earth.
Roughly. Our planet Earth can provide about 1 billion humans at my quality of life. And so I'm like, come on guys, I want you to have a good life, like I'm giving to my children. I love all Jaws people equally. So I want all of these folk to have it good. And I can't do that. And then of course the other idea is if we all were going to have the same quality of life, I got to step it down by 1/7 or so. No, by 6/7. You understand the math of that? Which would be pretty rough, because like most days I'm bummed at all the stuff I don't have. As abundant as my life is, I'm not like, I got too much good. I mean, I guess I should recognize that, but I keep seeing the glass is half empty. One of you drives out of here in your like shiny Beamer, and I'm like, oh, I'm a loser.
Get the Tesla truck.
I can't even get tires for my truck. Say,
So the logical thing to do here is put money into space exploration to find more Earths.
What do you
No.
think about Mars? The whole Mars thing and people living
Bro, any problem that we have here on Earth is 100 times easier to solve than making a new Earth.
Literally every
No,
problem
but
I gotta say that in all the time I've known Matt, that's the first thing he's ever said that I thought was actually coherent. So I know it's like a reflex to tune him out, but give him a second. What?
Yeah, like. terraforming Mars has to be like way harder than just
I'm
like.
not saying terraform Mars.
Well, how are you gonna get like a major colony, like on Mars? What poor nation's resources are you gonna use to build this
I'm not
colony?
saying go
you
to
know?
Mars. Did I ever say go to Mars?
You said, bro, find another Earth. Where?
Well, there actually is
You know how damn long it
That
takes to get to
way.
another star?
Checkmate, Rioli. Wow, wow, wow.
Two best friends, like, yeah, I'm like, we're in
I mean, I know. It's like we want to have our cake and eat it too. When I said cutting our quality of life by 6/7, everybody's like, well, what else? And I'm like, no, but like there's not other Earths, and like we can't put Earth somewhere else, and we can't get another Earth. Travel is slow. Spaceships explode. They don't carry a lot of cargo. Like, it's a big ass planet, and just a few of us are using it all up. Imagine moving the other 6 Earths equivalent of cargo to this population.
The price would be astronomical.
or moving people.
Don't forget all the stuff that we don't see that is a wedge of the earth for us, like all that farmland, like all that forest that is logged to give us the lumber to build the home that we see. We just need like 1/1000th of that for each of us. It's like this huge funnel with you at the bottom. Oh, sorry, back. Thank you. Just walk around the room a couple more times.
There's like 2 more bigger ones.
And I don't know how to feel about this. You know, if we're not going to give all those people an equitable quality of life, if we are assuming that the only alternative is for them to keep slicing a small pizza, that doesn't end well either. Not just for them. That doesn't end well for us. You all realize, right, that like hungry, desperate people are easily recruited. To do dangerous things or atrocious things. If you're rich and well fed, you're not going to blow yourself up. Hey, soccer mom, put on this vest. Soccer mom's like, no, like we got people for that. No. We send our poor off. Like, rich men don't fight in wars. All that unrest, all those people that can't keep slicing the pizza, they're like, bro, I got mouths to feed. I'm sorry, you gotta go. The desperation of all these people not having enough wedges, we're not immune to that. They're still putting all their stuff into the same ocean that we get our luxurious food from. They're still lighting the same fires that affect the same atmosphere that my children breathe. And it's a lot. Like, holy crap, that is 2 Californias a year. When I say a year as a budding whole human, you know, a couple of years ago, you were like blowing bubbles in the bath, right? So when I say like a whole year, for you, that's like, but when you're a geezer like me, the clock accelerates. For me, a year is like tick, 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 tick. I was born on a planet with 4.2 billion humans. So when I say 2 Californias in a year, you're like, wow, that's gonna be weird. But when I say 2 Californias in a year, I see what 42 of those years looks like. when I turn 50, if our planet will have doubled in size during my lifetime alone.
You got like 30 years, don't worry.
Human population did this, and then it did that, and then it did this, and then it did that, and I was born, and human population has started to taper off. Sometime around 2050, 2060, it'll stop, no big deal, at roughly, that's probably right when I'll cash in my chips. Like even if I get lucky and have a long life, I don't think I'm gonna go past that. In my last days, the screens will babble at me that this is really slowed down. Right around the time you turn 50, you'll go to this website,
The first thing I do when I wake
and it'll basically be flatline. It'll basically be flatline at 11 or 12 billion.
And then from then on, does it just keep on going flat, or will it go down, or?
What do I know, man? Now all the questions you want to ask me, I'd like to remind you that so far all I've done is point at a screen with a website. This is the maximum of my knowledge. I am out of things to say for you. I don't know. I can tell you that so far no economy has grown without population growth in long-term large economies. There has never been an exception for a, like national scale economy to grow for the long term, like multiple year cycles, without a growing population. So I don't know what that world economy will look like. I don't know what that many people's quality of life will be. I don't know how many of them will be desperately hungry or desperately frustrated. But if I see one more person say, I'm not thinking about it, I'm gonna snap. It is like such a luxury to not care. Like this is what privilege looks like. To be like, have you seen my pantry? Food shortages? What are you talking about? Lazy acres. Right? Like, I mean, I kind of feel like that's where we are right now. That like every time, I do this every year, like 4 or 5 times a year, right? Because I teach multiple periods of the same class over and over. So I've been doing this, and the only thing that changes is the faces. Like windshield wipers. It's another year. It's another year. It's another year. And it'll just be like tick, 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 tick. I was like, thoughts, questions, response, gut feelings?
All this talk about food's making me hungry.
Me too. Ring my bell. Hungry! You get my food delivered? That's it? Oh, yeah.
If like people know that they can't afford to like have more kids, like what makes them have that many more kids?
That it's the opposite of what we would think. The only people whose population grow are the poor. And we think of, or you think of, you and your peers think of starting a family as a decision, first of all, as a choice, and one that you can make strategically because you have so many other options. I'm happy for you. That is like the greatest gift that life bestows on you is options. Like, there is no greater wealth than options. I'm psyched that you're like, maybe not have kids, maybe not right now. But usually someone will ask me this, but I gotta come back to this because it's part of our curriculum. In a couple of minutes, we're gonna talk about why the poor have the most children. And poor countries have more population growth only because they have more poor people. In a poor country, the rich don't have a lot of children, and in a rich country, only the poor have a lot of children. You can see that in your own hometown. There's exceptions to all the rules, but as a pattern, the poor have more children. And I actually, I'm glad you asked, because I always feel like there's one thing I gotta share, and then I'm gonna close this out. But I wanna mute our microphone because this story is not for broadcast.
Yeah. I thought so.
I think most of the vocab is in the book, but there's usually a couple. Vocab questions? Yes?
Emergent disease and starts with a Z.
Emergent diseases
Zoonotic.
are those which are becoming a problem. It's new. It's coming up. It is emerging. So speaking of Samoa, they have not had a measles problem until just now. All of a sudden, holy mackerel, they have an emergent threat of measles. It is becoming epidemic to Samoa. Epidemic is when a disease spreads through a single group, a population. A single group of population. If that measles spreads to another island, then you could say it's pandemic. That's when diseases cross borders between groups. And I'm warning you that epidemic and pandemic are kind of fuzzy terminology. So epidemic could be a population in a single country. Like AIDS was first epidemic in the US among gay men. And today, that epidemic is worst among young black women. So you could say that AIDS has been a pandemic epidemic in the US. Usually pandemic is a border, not just a subpopulation, but a discrete population. Zoogenic means a disease comes from humans. Like HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus, which is a mutation of the SIV, which was a monkey virus that changed, it genetically mutated, to now live in humans. Zoogenic. Comes from animals, mutates to become a human disease. Other vocabs? No other vocabs? I like it. I like it. Study goal number 26. Show me with your thumb, please. With your thumb. I am very comfortable with exponential growth. I know what a J-curve is. I think I was in a math class that mentioned exponential growth, but I'm not really math-brained at all. Or I have no idea what you're talking about with this exponential blah, blah, blah. Show me with your thumbs, please. I need to see from everyone. You can keep it low-key if you have to. I don't mind. Like, you don't have to raise your hand. But I kind of got to assess my class opinion on exponential growth. Riali, do you have an opinion? Hey, all right. I'll just remind you that a small percentage of a big number is a lot of growth. 1.15% growth on 7.8 billion is 83 million a year. So that's a really small percentage of a really big number, 1.15%. Everybody got that? So growing by any percentage once you have a big number is still a lot. If you're a billionaire and somebody gives you a 1% return on $1 billion, you're going to make a lot of money this year. It's only 1%. Like 1% of a dollar is not much profit. But 1% of a bigger number gives you a bigger, that's the exponential growth thing. Any percentage human growth is a lot of growth. So if your birth rate is 3%, which is pretty humble, but your death rate is only 2%, you're going to grow by 1%. And that's easy. You don't have to do a lot of math. Birth is positive and death is negative, so you just add and subtract them. They're a percentage of the same value. And remember that immigration is a positive number, whereas emigration is a negative number.
Why does it have to be such similar words? Immigration and emigration.
I understand the challenge, and I can help you with one thing. You go into or you exit. So positive numbers, negative numbers, net change. That's growing because you're adding a percent every year. Given an exodus, that's shrinking because you're shaving off. So negative growth is the same as shrinking. There's a lot of math in number 26, and that was it. Question about 26? '27 is this thing. Hunter-gathering. There was a jump at early agriculture. There was a jump at the early industrial. There was a jump at the Green Revolution. You have to be able to explain those, and by now I think you've heard all that, right? Like hunter-gathering was pretty easy, relatively speaking, for humans. But staying put allowed women to produce more offspring in one life. That's this one. Starting earlier in the industrial age, when mom would kick you out to go live in a home with your couple when you were younger, was this jump. Making more food to feed all the humans was this one. Ever understood those? Question you could ask me now. I'm repeating because I think those already come up in my class, but if you don't remember, you could ask me.
So is it basically like population jumps for different reasons after each phase?
Yeah, population jumped for different reasons every time. I need you to take some notes on number 29. There was this German chancellor named Willy Brandt, and I'm happy to be corrected, but I'm pretty sure that his actual name was Willy. Which boggles the mind, doesn't it? Wacky Germans. And Willy Brandt thought that Germany had done a lot of bad things in the last few decades, and he thought, now that our economy is coming back up to speed, maybe we should do some good on this earth. And so Willy Brandt said, we should help the countries that need help. And how do we know who needs help? And so he ranked economies. And he said, these are all the rich countries, and these are all the poor countries. And so here's the average. And he said, we should map who are the above average economies, because maybe they could all pitch in to help the below average economies. Very strategic, very German. And strangely, when he color-coded them on a map, he was like, whoa! What a surprising pattern! They are not a checkerboard of wealth and poverty. They are a line. This was a controversial idea in the early 1980s. It's called the Brandt line, and named after Willy Brandt. You have to know that. You have to know that this map is outdated. It's 40 years later, y'all. Like China has moved above the line, or the line has moved south of China. There are some blips now, where the Middle East has kind of carved itself more little pockets. Persian Gulf nations. A little bit. But what's interesting, a lot of those chunks of red are still chunks of red. And if you'll notice the exceptions to the rule, you might understand this pattern. Like the North is doing better than the South. Quick distinction, you probably want to see this. Look over here. Quick distinction, that's the equator. So north of the equator and south of the equator is not the Brandt line. Here's the Brandt line. It's roughly 30 degrees north. But it has cutouts in the south, like that country and those two countries. Can anybody explain this weird pattern that Brandt saw?
Colonization.
That's right. And I know that's obvious, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but basically this is a map of white. Or a map of, white cultural association and government relationships. Like I'm white, I come from one of those red countries, but cut away from the colonies earlier. And this is a pretty clumsy way to discuss this, so today you'll also get this in your notes. We try to measure development a little bit more carefully than above and below average. We use a lot of variables. There are countries with a ton of money and a ton of poverty at the same time, because a couple people have all the money. So looking at the amount of money is sloppy. This was just the amount of money, and that's sloppy. Angola has a lot of money now. But if you live in Angola, your life probably sucks, unless you're that guy that took all the money. So another way to measure this is what we call development. How's your stability? How's your economic activity? How's your health care? How's your electricity? How's your education? So on. Fascinating detail, America used to be one of the highest life expectancies, which is understandable because we're a very developed country. We have a lot of money. But strangely, the United States has been dipping in life expectancy because of the opioid epidemic. I don't know where we are. I haven't looked in a couple years, but I think we're like number 16 now. And as much as we like to brag, I feel like we should try to solve that problem a little bit. Well, yeah, let them die. That's what I say.
Can you go back?
What?
Can you go back one?
I mean, if you think all people make the decisions equally in all situations, I got news for you, bro. And if you add up a very complicated index of development, it's called the HDI. I can't remember. You could Google it, I guess. 183 variables or something, 174 variables. Liam, do you remember this? I think your father used to teach about the HDI. Would you have this information on the tip of your tongue? Do you know everything he knows? How many variables in the HDI?
No.
Okay, yeah.
Why is Somalia and a few others great?
There's a few countries that don't report. So one of the stands doesn't report. Somalia apparently did not report. And every year, this is outdated too. I made this slideshow like 20 years ago, so who knows what it looks like now. But if you rank countries on a 1 to 100 scale, and it's not a competition, it's just a score. So the leading country's a 93, and the worst country's like a 16. So you're not ranked, you just get a number. So there's like 5 countries that are ranked 92. Okay, it's a score. Like you could all get the same score on the test. It looks a lot like the ranking of money. And look at Angola. If you don't know where Angola is, it's in Africa. If you don't know where Africa is, this is Africa. It's not a country. It's a continent. So it's divided into many countries. Heads up. That one is Angola. That green one. And Angola has like a surprisingly good economic volume. You would think that must give you a good quality of life. But you can't just look at the money, because watch Angola. Their development is pretty low. It's not just how much money in your country, but how do you use that money. Angola seems to use it for gold toilet seats on private jets for one guy and his trophy wife.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. That's what I would do with my money. Money's a pretty good way to predict where the babies are. Technically, we say development, because money of a country is not money of its people, but development is how money is used towards people. And those countries are the ones that have all the babies. Not the US, not Canada, not Australia, not the Scandinavian nations, not Japan. They do not have a lot of babies because they tend to be pretty well developed. Why do poor people have so many babies? Didn't somebody ask me that earlier?
Yes.
Isn't it weird that these poor people have so many babies? 5 things, and we're on a schedule today. I babbled too long, so I just need you to write quickly before we run out of time. Poor people have a lot of babies because, number 1, female disenfranchisement. To be disenfranchised means you don't get the decision-making power. Franchise is a group of people that decide together. So where women are not part of decision-making, they get pumped full of babies, and it's not really their choice. And that's a correlation with poverty, even in this country, even in your city, even at your school. You know, where women have wealth, women have power. Like, I'm assuming that if your mommy doesn't like your daddy, then you know, maybe she has choices, right? She could hire a lawyer, she could call the police, she could get her own job, she could get her own money, she could have her own house, she could have her own career, she could be president. Maybe not. But in places where the economy is really small, the best explanation I have is plain brute force. Men tend to be bigger on average than women on average. In areas with a lot of poverty, women tend to be disenfranchised. It's hard to explain precisely, but women have less power decision making. They don't get to do that. And so, girls, the greatest gift that life could give you is options. I hope that you can choose whether and how many babies. But if you're a poor woman below the global average, you really don't get that decision, because what else are you going to do? You're not going to leave your man, because how else are you going to eat? Who's going to take care of you? In many parts of the world, a poor woman on her own doesn't have legal protections, doesn't have help from law enforcement. So like, yeah, my husband keeps pumping me full of babies, but what else am I going to do? At least I'm eating, at least I'm not being beaten to death daily. Number 2. We often say unlimited access to birth control, but I don't want you to write that. I'd like you to write that as a limited access to medical care in general. You know, birth control is not complicated, it's not expensive, it's not difficult. Like, I don't want to make any assumptions, right? But I'm just gonna say this as a guess, and you don't have to correct me, but I think all of you could get birth control if you wanted it. Pretty easily. Even if your mommy and daddy didn't want you to, I think you could. It's not complicated. But then if you think about it, you could also get headache medication. You could also get a broken tooth fixed. If your bone snaps, people will fix that. You've got people for that. Globally, the idea of manipulating your body is foreign to many people. The poor will just hope that the bone sets correctly. I've been to parts of the world where people are missing eyeballs, they're all missing teeth, they all have tweaked arms or legs from broken bones or preventable diseases, and they just don't do medicine. And so you're like, you know you could take medicine for that, and they're like, not really? And so if you say, hey, you know you can take medicine for that ovulation pattern, they'd be like, well, when you're generally outside of medical care, you're also excluded from birth control. Yeah?
Also, religion plays a much greater
But you know what's interesting? The most religious countries still, the poor are the ones who have problems and the rich are not. So Italy is probably the most Catholic country on earth and their population is shrinking. Because women still have choices. It's like, I'm not going to use birth control, but I'm still empowered as a part of this household to say not tonight, honey, or to make other choices. Number 3, this is a really explicit way to say this too. Age of first childbearing. The poor start earlier. And that's true in our community, at our school, that's true everywhere. The poor make babies at an earlier age. And that makes all the difference. Girls, let me mansplain how your ovaries work.
Thank you.
This is my specialty, ladies. Just sit back. I think most people know that women's reproductive life is finite on both ends. It all starts at a specific moment and it ends at a kind of a fuzzy fizzle of fertility at the end. It's kind of a spotty ending for most women, but it's a really clear beginning. And of course, your fertility is in a constant decline through that time. Ticking, 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 ladies. Right around your second or third period, a woman is the most fertile that she'll ever be. The highest chances of fertilization, of implantment, of a full-term successful pregnancy leading to a successful labor that she can recover from and that the baby can wean after. All those variables are highest at about your second or third period. And they all go down a little tiny bit. Still at this age, you're extremely fertile. If you're in the same room as a loose sperm, you just got pregnant. That's science. You learned it from me. Maybe a slight exaggeration, but not that far from the truth. As you start to age into your middle 20s and after, your fertility really does, all those variables I gave you, the chances of fertilization, of implantment, of successful full term, of successful delivery, of successful weaning and recovery, all of those variables start to go down in your mid-20s, late 20s, they go down more. You go from A triple plus to A double plus to A to C to holy crap, it's getting difficult to make a baby by your 40s, 30s, depending on variables. If you start right after your first period, you're gonna definitely make a baby every 12 to 15 months until the end. But if you start in your 30s, you might get a couple babies. So we distract you. When you're super fertile like this, we're like, hey, how about college, huh? College? No babies right now, college? Oh, you wanna be a sculptor? Here, we'll help you go sculpt. Yeah, just no babies right now. But the poor have an early age of first childbearing, again, because they don't have a lot of other options. In a poor part of the world, it's tough to feed a friggin' 15-year-old. My girl's 13, she won't stop eating. If I could kick her out, I probably would. If I was savagely poor and struggling to feed her little brother, I'd be like, well, you blossom, you're out. See if some man will take care of you. And when you can't eat otherwise, remember, it's a luxurious choice for all of us. I hope that for all of you. But for the poor, it's not a choice, and you just start earlier. Early age of first childbearing. Number 4, we all have a culture. Everybody's got some culture. There is no answer that is just culture. But one way to say this is high death rates necessitate high birth rates. And most of us have the same number of children that our parents do. So if your great-grandma had 12 babies and 2 survived, your grandma probably had 12 babies, but 3 or 4 survived. And then your mom and dad had 12 babies, but 10 of them survived. And then you'll have 12 babies, but they all survive. So high death rates require high birth rates, but the birth rates are cultural. Does that make sense to everybody? And number 5, there's this relatively subtle thing that we're almost out of time called the labor effect. The idea that the world's poor often need to breed a workforce. Like if it's tough to run your farm, you